Guys, today we are going to be making Picasso faces. We're going to use a collage technique. I am using cardboard. However, cardboard is not the only material that you can use. As you can see here, this is Georgia. Isn't she adorable? Most of it I used is cardboard. This is cardboard where I ripped, but I also have some construction paper here, as well as some scraps of material that I had from sewing projects that I pulled out and used as well, and I glued those onto cardboard. So there are multiple different options. This is from a bubbly water box because it's got the little lips on the smile. This is Georgia, my dog, and I did a portrait of her so that she looks a little bit like a Picasso type picture. She's hopping up to find out what's going on. So real quick, this you will have available to you. This is just a paper that's filled with different pieces and parts of a face. So we have a bunch of different types of eyes here, different types of noses, different types of mouths, different types of ears that you might see if you were looking at a picture or a portrait drawn by Picasso in the cubistic style that he was pretty famous for. Picasso is one of two artists who came up with this style of art, cubism. They wanted to come up with different ways to make art interesting and to keep it relevant, because people were not looking at art as much as they had been in the past, because we had cameras now that people were able to use to take pictures and to capture moments, landscapes, houses, still lifes that they hadn't had in the past and that they used artists for. So this is an example. This is a copy that I made of one of Picasso's cubism portraits that he did. This I just drew real quick on a piece of cardboard so that I have it close by for you to reference. And notice he used a lot of shapes that were some geometric, but also a lot of them are not. They don't have names, they're just odd shapes. But they use a lot of corners as well as circles, half circles, pie shapes, that type of stuff. So they are organic in that they aren't a specific shape, but they're also not necessarily shapes that you would find out in nature. It's basically shapes that have been cut up and put together in odd, awkward angles to make a mishmash. The eyes aren't even. This guy doesn't have any ears. The mouth is kind of a profile version of the mouth, and the nose is the front, what you would see if you were looking at somebody eye to eye, nose to nose. So he liked to mix things up. He'd like to put eyes at odd angles, ears at odd angles, mouths in funny places. Here's an example that I drew today of me, although I don't have glasses on in this picture. We are gonna make a portrait of me with my glasses on in a little bit. But he did a lot with using black and white and gray that he also mixed in with really bright, brilliant colors. And he used colors that were not expected. Now, sometimes he worked all in one tone of color. He has a couple of pictures. Brock, his friend who also did this, tended to work more in earth tones. Picasso did some earth tones, but he also used really bright, unexpected colors as well, which is always fun. So we're gonna do that today. So the reason I have this sheet here for you that you can use is because sometimes when we get into the creating process, we forget what shapes we wanted to use. So I have this resource here, but also we can draw out how we want this to look before we get started so that we can kind of make it look that way. So what we would do is, let me get a piece of sketch paper here so that we can do this together, and I'm going to clear this space here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm gonna sketch out what I wanna draw before I draw it. All right, here's my pencil. So obviously, we kind of want to have an idea of what the face is going to look like. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw the shape of my face, which would be a U shape right here. Picasso worked in a way that he distorted and kind of cracked and broke apart fractured pieces. So instead of drawing my eyes and nose like I normally would, I'm going to draw a little bit of a crack kind of right down the middle of the paper here. And this splits my face in two. I'm going to go ahead and draw a neck down here. Just so I don't go floating off the paper. We got to be grounded somehow. Obviously, this is going to get broken up too. So if I wanted to just kind of draw a little bit of a jagged line here, maybe a little bit of a jagged line there, it's kind of going to break and fracture that paper up some and give me some spaces to work within. Now, this is just a starting point. This is a sketch. So what I draw here may not end up being what my final picture looks like, and that's okay. So I'm going to go ahead and just finish these lines and have them all get All right, guys, so now that I have my portrait completed, I wanted to go ahead and go back to the sketch that I started at the beginning of this video, where I was showing you I was kind of sketching everything out to get an idea of how I wanted it to look. Now my final piece doesn't look a lot like my sketch. Not enough space really to put them side by side. So here's the final. Here's the sketch. There are some parts and pieces that are the same, but it doesn't look exactly the same because, as you saw while I was putting things together, what worked here didn't necessarily work here because this is a different material, and that's okay. So I switched it around. This just gave me something to work from. Now, as you notice, there is a whole lot more drawn here now than there was at the beginning of the video because I drew more and added more details to it off camera. I do want to point out here, you can see I draw lines, and then when I go and start drawing another piece, like this flower that I drew here, I erase those lines there for the hair because I want this flower to be in front of the hair. The flower is not going to be see-through. It's not going to be transparent, so I wouldn't be able to see the hair through it. So I'm erasing those hair lines because that part of the hair will be behind the flower. The lighter that you draw with your pencil, see right here for this cheek and this cheek highlight, the easier it's going to be to erase your lines so that they're not visible. However, we are going to be coloring over these, and we're going to be using some pretty dark colors. So I worked with the cardboard. You can color it with marker, with crayon, or with oil pastels. I used oil pastels where I colored. This yellow is actually construction paper. This purple is construction paper. The red and green over here are also construction paper. This is fabric. This orange right here is fabric. Everything else, this flower is colored in. The stripes here are colored in. This is colored. These are both colored. And all of those that I colored are with oil pastels. This is actually white construction paper, and I drew on it with black Sharpie. Same as here, here, and here. So if you decide that you want to do something similar to that, but you don't want to do it on cardboard, because this is actually pretty thick. If you look at it, it stands out. Oh, I have a loose piece in there somewhere. Oh, yeah, that's okay. But if you look, you can see there are parts of it that stick out pretty far. If you want to work a little bit more flat, but you still want to do that collage method, you can do that here on this drawing. And you can use construction paper. You can draw and color on top of your construction paper, as you saw here from this example. I've drawn on my construction paper. I've colored on it. You can color on it with crayons and markers, just like you can with the oil pastels. If you have dark paper, lighter colors are going to show up on it better if you're using crayons. If you have light paper, darker colors will show up better with the crayons. If you're using markers, the darker the paper, the harder it is going to be to see the markers on there. You can even do a combination. You can mix your crayons and your markers together. That's also fun. So this is how I would start off my collage if I wanted to just do a collage on paper. I would draw it all out, and then I would go find a whole bunch of different colored papers. You can even use magazines to get the different colors that you want, and you would cut them out to fit these shapes that you want to put them in. You do want to make sure that when you're done, you trace all of these lines, all of your pencil lines, all of your final lines. You want to trace them either in a really dark permanent marker, a Sharpie, or you want to use, so for example here, I used a black oil pastel. If you color with crayon, you're going to want to trace your pencil lines with a black crayon, because you cannot draw on top of crayon with marker or Sharpie. It will get the tip of your crayon and Sharpie dirty, and you'll have to clean it off a lot, but it's going to be really hard to do. I did it here, and I had to clean the tip off of my Sharpie quite a bit, and also my black lines aren't as black and as bold as I would like them to be. But I did that so you could kind of have an example of why you would want to use, if you're using crayons, you want to use a black crayon. If you're using oil pastels, you're going to want to use a black oil pastel, because you're going to get a really good bold line with those on top of the crayons in the oil pastels. You're not going to get that if you do marker on top of those. All right, guys. Most important thing to remember is have fun. I can't wait to see what you come up with. Do not try to do this in one day. This is a multiple day project. It took me from beginning to end to work on this. I did do this in one day, but this picture itself took me probably 4 or 5 hours to put together. So please don't try to do this all in one day. Take your time, split it up over a couple of days, have some fun. All right? Can't wait to see what you come up with.